Close ranks! Ordered Trastevere. And now the discipline and training of the Justerin took its toll on their attackers. The last of the gunfire died away, and Sharokin knew Talabvita 37's monsters were all dead. She had promised her legionaries would buy them some time, but Sharokin had seen the Justerin in action and knew it wouldn't be much. They'd survived longer than he had expected, but it still wouldn't be enough. He, Tyro, and Branthan were badly wounded, their bodies all but broken and losing lethal volumes of blood inside their warplate. They were leaving sticky tracks even a blind man could follow. Garuda flew alongside them, its flight erratic thanks to its buckled wings and crash-dented body. Branthan staggered with every step, one hand pressed to the wall to support him as he moved. The heart of iron was keeping him alive through some ancient miracle of technology he didn't understand, but surely even it could not support his existence much longer. Tyro ran hunched over, the grinding pressure of his broken back doubling him up as his spine tore itself to splinters within its muscled sheath. If he reached beyond the mountain, it would be a tale worthy of Medusa's finest, a legend to inspire future generations of Iron Hands, were there going to be any. His own wounds were minor by comparison, though the pain racing around his body did not match that objective assessment. The crushed vertebrae in his back screamed agony with every running footfall, and the wound in his side kept tearing open. A sensation of emptiness in his chest told him his primary heart had been ruptured, and the secondary organ was taking the strain. A legionary's reserve heart was only intended to sustain a wounded warrior for short bursts of time, until he could reach the apothecaries. It hadn't been designed for extended stresses like this. He wondered how much longer it could last.
"Did you hear that?"
gasped Tyro, falling to his knees with a grunt of pain.
"They'll be coming now."
"Then get up, damn you,"
said Branthan, hauling Tyro to his feet.
"You are an Iron Hand. We don't kneel in the presence of the enemy."
Tyro bit back a cry of pain and drew a sucking breath.
"Apologies, Captain,"
he grunted, his fists bunched against the pain.
"It won't happen again."
"The interest of the ductway isn't far," Sharokin told him. Tyro nodded, but said nothing. His every scrap of will focused on simply putting one foot in front of the other. A booming voice echoed through the underground passageways, full of indignant anger and a hunger for vengeance.
"You cannot run forever,"
it said.
"We will catch you, and your deaths will not be as quick as your Gene Witch's monsters. I, Trastevere of the Justerin, Captain of the Eyes Watch, promise you this."
They pushed onwards. Every metre gained a victory, every step that brought them closer to the outside a gift. They could hear the crashing footsteps of the Justerin behind them, ponderous and inevitable as a coming storm. Trastevere's taunts followed them, each word promising bloody retribution and pain. Sharokin believed every word of it. His spirit soared as he saw the single trapezoidal archway that led to the storage chamber. Irradiated fumes swirled just below the ceiling, the venting system no longer functional, nor drawing any of the toxins from within.
"We're here,"
said Sharokin, threading the stacks of piled-high construction material and broken machinery towards the entrance of the venting network.
"Come on."
He paused at the entrance to the ductway when he saw that Tyro and Branthan were not following him. One look at how the two captains had positioned themselves told Sharokin what they were planning.
"If you fight, they'll kill you," he said.
Tyro worked the action of his bolter, checking what load he had left. The underslung loaders on Branthan's arms clattered with the last of his shells shucking into the flex mag.
"We cannot outrun them,"
said Branthan, staring through the arch.
"So we will fight them."
Sharokin's instinct to strike back at the traitors warred with his urge to escape the mountain. He had no love for Branthan, but counted Tyro as a loyal comrade in arms. They were not friends, but they had shed blood together, their own and that of traitors. Branthan read the turbulent struggle of emotions within him.
"We cannot outpace the sons of Horus, but you can," he said, turning away. "Go, Raven God. Get the Magna Mater out of here. Consider this my last command."
Sharokin hesitated, torn between obeying the order and fighting alongside his brothers.
"Nakono,"
said Tyro.
The mission comes first. It always does. It can be no other way.
Sharakin snapped the magazine from his bolter. He handed the shells to Tyro.
Make every shell count, Cadmus, he said.
Chapter 11. A glorious death. Breaking free. Alone in the dark. A curious calm settled over Cadmus Tyro as he thumbed the last of the shells into the magazine of his bolter. He wished he'd had better words to see the Raven Guard warrior on his way, some way to convey the honour it had been to fight alongside him. Now only he and Branthan remained. Even Garuda was gone. The bird had perched on Branthan's shoulder and leaned down as if whispering silently in his ear. Branthan had nodded, and the bird had flown off into the ductwork without a backward glance.
"Where's it going?"
asked Tyro.
"Wherever it wills," replied Branthan. "Enough of Garuda. Look to your weapon."
Tyro had. Even with Sharakin's ammo, the magazine wasn't full.
"A few bursts, and we'll be hand to hand," he said.
"Against Terminators,"
said Branthan. Tyro looked up, and with a slow nod said,
"Almost seems unfair to them."
"We will give them a glorious death by which to remember us,"
Tyro said.
"Since the fire and fury of Istvan V, I have been ready to meet this day. Our escape from the world of the Black Sands only delayed this death."
"I died there,"
said Branthan.
"or as near as makes no difference. Every time you brought me back from my frozen stasis, I assumed it would be for the last time. I always knew I would be forced to pay back the debt of life incurred on that day. Now, that debt is due."
"I always expected to die far from Terra's light, on some nameless battlefield at the limits of known space," said Tyro. "I would be centuries older, grizzled and with a long history of service to the Imperium. I would have lived a life of honor and few regrets."
"Before the galaxy went mad, I never considered my own death," replied Branthan. "Not even in theoretical dialogues with the 13th. The apothecaries told me that we were basically immortal, and the remembrances claimed we were gods. That should have been warning enough, for what story of gods does not end with them cast down and destroyed?"
Tyro didn't answer. He saw the shadows of the approaching Justerin. He said,
"Captain Branthan, it has been an honor."
3 hulking shapes moved into the span of the archway, Terminators in armor of deepest black. Their appearance shocked Tyro, for they were torn up and looked as though they had fought their way from one end of a starship to another. Seldom did any foe give company veterans such a beating. Branthan seemed to shrug, and his underslung guns chugged out heavy bolt rounds at subsonic velocities. They struck the lead Terminator, and sparks blazed where they met warplate. Metal tore and ceramite chips flew like shrapnel. The warrior staggered and took a step back, but didn't fall. He swung his weapon to bear. Tyro leaned out from his cover, aimed and squeezed the trigger. A pair of mass reactives struck the Terminator's magazine, and the warrior's fist vanished in a blazing shower of secondary detonations. The second Terminator swung his assault cannon towards Tyro, its long rotary barrels already spun up to firing speed. A blitzing storm of high-velocity shells ripped through the crates and materiel. Tyro dived to the side, shooting as he went. The grinding of shattered bone in his back filled his body with pain, and a grey haze dropped across his eyes. He rolled to his feet in agony and aimed for the cannon's ammo hopper at the weapon's rear. He fired, but his aim was skewed, and the shell only creased the box. It ricocheted away, and Tyro gritted his teeth against the pain that bathed his body in fire. A shell struck him in the chest and exploded against the face of his plastron. It didn't penetrate, but impact trauma drove him back. He staggered and returned fire. Another shell struck him at the junction of thigh and hip, and this one did penetrate. The explosion blew out the left side of his pelvis, shards of his femur and metal driving up into his gut and groin. Blood filled Tyro's mouth, and he felt entire portions of his internal anatomy come undone. The damage to his organs was catastrophic and utterly non-survivable. Ferocious pain engulfed him, and he fell backwards against a stack of crates like a king reclining on his throne. The grey haze over his vision bled into red, and he saw Branthan moving as though in a picked capture, running at half speed. The slides of his bolters racked back empty. His fellow captain's chest was a shattered, chewed-up mess of bloody tunnels carved through his body. Only the heart of iron remained untouched, its silver body pulsing fit to burst. Branthan ripped the assault cannon from one of the Justerin and swung it like a club. The heavy breech section caved in the skull of the weapon's bearer. Vast quantities of blood, bone fragments, and sopping brain matter sprayed from the ruins of the warrior's helm. He turned to swing it at the third Terminator, but a shell from a storm bolter ploughed a furrow through the top of his skull. It didn't detonate, but carved a canyon through his forehead. Branthan swayed, but remained upright, his body locked in place. For the briefest moment, Tyro dared hope he might fight on, as he had many times before. But one look into Branthan's blood-filled eyes told him he was dead. The heart of iron was finally stilled, and a hero of the Iron Hands had passed from this life. Though his body of flesh and blood was no more, the rigid chassis that had once been the sarcophagus of Brother Bombastus still held him upright. Even in death, Ulrach Branthan did not kneel in the presence of the enemy. The sons of Horus turned on Tyro. He raised his bolter and pulled the trigger one last time. The weapon clicked empty. Like him, it had nothing left to give. The Justerin who had killed Branthan towered over him, a warrior bearing the rank insignia of a captain, as well as other markings Tyro didn't recognize, but from which he instinctively recoiled. The Justerin captain held the assault cannon, his fallen brother's blood and brains still wet on its metal. Surely this was Trastevere.
"Only one more remains," said the traitor.
Tyro summoned his last breath to spit defiance.
"Only one, yes. But he is Ravenguard,"
said Tyro with the last of his strength.
"He has a 4-minute head start, which is more than he needs. Sharokin was trained by the Shadow Masters of Lycaeus, and knows every secret path from here to the Mare Tranquillitatis. Throne, he knows Luna's craters better than the Salinar. With any luck, he's already halfway to Terra."
Trastevere laughed, a rank bitter sound, and said,
"Iron Hands make terrible liars."
Tyro shook his head.
"And Sons of Horus make terrible legionaries."
Trastevere raised the assault cannon.
"You have a valediction?" "I have lived a life of honor and few regrets," said Tyro. "Can you say the same?"
The assault cannon roared, and the debt incurred on Istvan V was finally paid in full. Sharokin emerged from the